Hi, Zoomies and Facebook Live friends of the JCC and the Seattle Jewish Film Festival and Arts and Ideas. We are so excited to have you back for today's Zoom interview. I'm extremely excited and honored to have my good friends from Israel Story here with us today, Mishy Harman and Yochai Maital, who are the co-founders, co-creators of Israel Story. And they're going to tell us a lot about both what Israel Story is, as well as why you need to tell Israel's story. And they had an amazing 12-hour marathon event yesterday, which I participated in for Israelpalooza, an amazing feat, international feat, and we'll hear all about that. But first, I just wanted to let those of you who are tuning in, maybe for the first time today, for our weekly events, that we have some incredible upcoming programs. Jay has gone while we are all sheltering in, and I hope everyone is safe and well and continues to be engaged with life and Jewish life and Israeli life as best as you can. And this is one way we can do it. So next week, I'm very excited that we have for our Divanathon, which is Couch Weekly Films and Conversations, filmmaker, Peabody and Emmy nominated filmmaker Aviva Kempner will be my guest. Many of you have seen the life and times of Hank Greenberg. More recently, Rosenwald. She won our Real Difference Award at the Seattle Jewish Film Festival a few years back. She's a fascinating person and the founder of the Washington, D.C. Jewish Film Festival. So join us on Tuesday next week. And then our next Zoom interview, we're kind of moving and shifting a little bit to interview some people in our community that are incredible for Zoom interviews. Lisa Fain will be with us. Lisa is the CEO for the Center for Mentoring Excellence. She's an author of a new book about bridging differences through mentoring, but she's going to give us the tools that we need right now to mentor the people that we are closest to in this situation, which is our families, our loved ones, our children, and hopefully the people that we're talking to over Zoom and the phone. So how can we learn the tools of mentoring to bridge differences between people and be better partners, better parents, and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. We also have our Bagel Bite series every Sunday. This weekend, we interviewed Blazing Bagels owner Dennis Ballin. It drops on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. and you can watch it anytime on Facebook or our JCC YouTube page. So with that, I wanted to welcome everybody back. I wanted to make sure that those of you know that you can communicate with us through the chat function and ask questions. And I look forward on Facebook Live as well. Yes. What's amazing is I feel very nervous right now to be interviewing the ultimate interviewers of stories around the globe. So I'm going to start off by saying Israel Story. It's known as This American Life in Israel, the top Jewish podcast in the world, Tablet Magazine, PRX. You guys do amazing work, and the JCC loves bringing you live. But I have to ask you this question. I know Ira Glass might ask this question as well. But This American Life is pointing at this or that American life. But Israel's Story says, I'm going to tell the whole story of Israel. So why did you decide to tell Israel's story?
So
there you go.
So, you know, perhaps our biggest mistake was in choosing the name for our project, because once we called ourselves Israel Story, we were really doomed. Of course, it's not the Israel Story, and perhaps there's something telling in the fact that we omitted the article, because you really can't tell a story fully, a story of a country. And what's most apparent, I think, to me, to us, to all of us working on this project for almost now a decade, is how many different Israels exist and how many different stories exist, and how little we actually even knew about our own country going into this project. So the Israel of living in Jerusalem is very different than the Israel of a Moshavnik living in the Lower Galilee, which is very different than the Israel of a Bedouin living in Kseife, which is so different from someone living in Bnei Brak. And what we try to do on the show is essentially sample that to the extent that we can, and just say, listen, this is a really complicated place. There are different realities here, and we hope to shine a light on as many of them as we possibly can.
So Yochai, I'm curious to know from your perspective, where did you come from when you first met Mishy? What's your story? What's the background of how you two met?
Oh, you're muted, Yochai.
Yeah, so I know Mishy from, I think when we were in third or fourth grade, something like that. We both went to the same youth movement, which is the Noam, the conservative youth movement. It's a tiny little thing in Israel. Most Israelis have no idea what it is. So when they have like, their field trips or something like that, they actually need to get kids from all over the country to fill one bus, basically. So that's how I grew up. I'm saying this because I grew up in Haifa, and Mishy is a Yerushalmi.
Wait, Yochai, can you show your screen?
I can. What do you mean? My screen is not showing?
No. I'm sending you a picture of exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I'll stop sharing on my end. Go ahead.
Let's see. Share screen.
I love how Yochai, you look like you're doing an Israel Story program right there in your.
What did you send me, Mishy? Where did you send it?
On WhatsApp.
Oh, on WhatsApp. 1 second. I'll open the web WhatsApp here. I actually turned it down so you guys don't get dinged too much, but I'll open it quickly for Mishy. Here, let's see this. Oh no.
Oh.
Here, I'll show it to you. Mishy sent it. Can you guys see it, or is the chat blocking? Here. Yeah.
Who's who? I can't tell. Who's the curly hair guy?
This is me, and this is Mishy. And yeah. Oh, sorry, that was a joke, Pamela, I guess. And yeah, I mean, I was Mishy's wingman I remember being his chief supporter in his bid to become Yor Noam, the sort of the teenage head of our youth movement, which Mishy became. He won that election. And yeah, we've been good friends ever since.
So there's something I would say as somebody who's done a lot of oral history in not necessarily radio or long form in the way you have, you guys are fairly young, and the project of storytelling feels like something that people cast as something for the historical societies, right? Radio has brought out a whole world of storytelling. And when did you start acclimating to that medium? How did this become the outlet?
Huh. I never thought about it that way, but I do, in some ways, I do feel sometimes a little bit like an old soul. And Mishy, well, most of Mishy's friends are above 80 or 90, to be honest with you. It's quite a phenomenon.
Yochai makes fun of me because I often will text him. I can't pick up the phone at the moment. I'm at a funeral.
But it's true, Mishy.
So when did Mishy, I almost said Michi, that would have been a great way to ask you both the same question. Mishy, when did you recognize your love of pulling people's stories out, and why Israeli stories? What was important about it that you had the aha moment?
I mean, of course, we all process information in the world in different ways, and I think I was always one that sort of remembered things better once they were told in a story manner to me. And even though I had spent many years in universities and in academia and working on my PhD and so on and so forth, I always gravitated more towards stories than towards arguments or theses. And we all had a lot of practice going on dates and telling stories to try to regale our counterparts on dates. But the origin of the project was that after many years, so where Yochai left off was that we had grown up together, and then we each went to the army. Yochai spent nearly a decade in the army as an officer. I was just a regular soldier for 3 years, but then came to the States to go to school and spent many years in the States in the university. And then coming back, I encountered this American life, and it was a real magical moment for me because it allowed me to sort of exit my own very limited existence of just the people that I happen to know, who, like most of us are, we surround ourselves with people who are relatively similar to us in all kinds of different ways, race or religion or socioeconomic status or education. And this American life introduced me to this whole other America, which I never encountered really. And it just so happened that that introduction happened during a massive road trip across America where I traveled 13,000 miles or something. So I was actually both seeing that America and now hearing their stories. And we thought that we would I thought that I would perhaps try to do something like this in Israel. And I think we actually have maybe a clip, Yochai. One of the reasons that I was so excited about this initially was because even though Israel is such a nation of people coming from all over in different traditions and different histories, and radio is a very popular medium in Israel, there really isn't anything like NPR or this kind of careful and calm audio storytelling. And most radio sounds more like what Yochai is going to play now. Let's see if that works.
Right, sorry, 1 second. It's gonna work. It didn't work right now, right? It didn't play? Sorry
I'm
about
going to just
that.
ad lib for a second while you're figuring this out, that tonight was the night, by the way, that you guys were supposed to be in Seattle
I know.
initially. So I just wanted to say that
We're so sad about that.
I know, well, your tour, everything, obviously coronavirus and otherwise, it is one of the favorite things every year. And for those that are watching that may or may not know what This American Life is and may not know what Israel's story is, hopefully you'll give us a little bit of a flavor of this multimedia live presentation that you do, which is visual, and I have some images to share. But we're super sad, obviously, for Yom Ha'Atzmaut that we missed having you for Israel Independence Day, and we wish that we'll be back next year for sure.
Yeah, you guys have really become a home to us. I mean, it's not a normal year without visiting Seattle. Thanks to you, Pamela, and we love coming back.
Seattle.
Exactly.
All right, Yochai, you ready?
I think so. Let's see. This is what radio in Israel sounds like for those of you who haven't had the privilege.
לא ענית על שאלה אחת, ינון מגל, תודה רבה לך. כן, לא, אתה.
מה ההבדל בינך לבין היטלר, כלב אדום שכמוך?
אז תלך קיבינימט לארצות הברית, אתה והחברים שלך, פשטינקן דרג גיי קיבינימטי, תעביר אותו מפה, לך לעזאזל.
So as you can hear, it doesn't exactly sound like your local public radio station. And we thought that perhaps we could go around and collect stories and try to tell these stories in a sort of calmer and careful way. And of course, we didn't know anything at all about radio or broadcasting or media. We were all on different paths and pursuing different lives. But we were 4 childhood friends, Yochai and I, and our 2 dear friends, Shai and Roy, and we just said, let's go for it. And Yochai, you want to continue from here?
The story of Israel story?
Yeah.
Do we want to go into the whole story? Basically, what happened is we started this radio show as a sort of a kind of a side hobby, a night project, essentially, that we were all doing while we were doing other things, studying and so forth. And it just took over our lives. Pretty quickly after our first Hebrew season, we were picked up by Galatz, which is sort of one of the main radio stations in Israel. And we had a very successful first season that led us to actually deciding to move the show to English for all kinds of reasons. And that was the birth of Israel's story. And that sort of took off in a whole different direction where we suddenly got to audiences, all over the world and North America, of course.
Maybe I'll just add that one of the biggest reasons to begin an English version of Sipur Israeli, of our show, was that we had all spent time in America and we had all encountered this unfortunate reality where these very flat narratives about Israel existed. So there was political narrative about Israel, which was all about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the occupation and Bibi and Iranian bombs and Security Council resolutions. And then there was a religious one, which was about how, Israel's a homeland for Jews, and how, it's such a pleasure because you can go into this supermarket and everything's kosher and you don't have to, look at the labels. And then there was a, Israel advocacy kind of hasbara narrative, which was all about Israel as a Silicon Valley and startup nation and cherry tomatoes and companies on the NASDAQ. And I guess we all felt that none of those narratives really reflected the complexity and the nuance of our Israel, which was much more complicated, basically. And that's what we wanted to share with our listeners.
Well, one of my favorite shows is the 48 Herzl Show. And maybe you could just talk about that, because just the name 48 Herzl is just so packed with significance. It's, the main street of the America, and who lives behind that door in so many cities throughout Israel. I don't know if you want to share any particular moments from that story or that show, or particular surprising ones, but you've managed in a way to look behind those 48 Herzls in every show that you do. And I don't know, we talked about a Yetzer Hara, the good and the bad of what you do, right? Are you putting out an Israel that's palatable? Are you putting out an Israel that's complicated and difficult? But many of the things that you do grapple with are nuanced to those in the diaspora, as well as folks within Israel itself, correct?
Yochai?
Mishy, Yochai. Yeah, sorry, I should ask who's doing.
No, it's
Yochai.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think a good story in general has to be nuanced and complicated. And when I think at least about storytelling, one of the things you try and sort of stay clear of is coming with a message, because that sort of takes the agency away from the listener. For me, at least, the fun part of engaging in a good story, whether it's in a novel, a podcast, a TV series, or whatever, is sort of being able to put my own interpretation on it and my own thoughts on it. And when you feel a story is trying to steer you to a certain way, it's really a turnoff. Artistically, and sort of, I don't think that's what good stories are in the world to do. They're there to, make you reflect and see yourself in the stories. So we try and do that. And Herzl 48 was actually a very different sort of experiment for us, because usually we let the stories lead us. And in Herzl 48, we decided to sort of impose this very strict set of rules on us. And we would only tell stories of people who lived in Herzl 48, which is Herzl is the most common street name in Israel, and 48 is just, kind of symbolic number that we came up with. And so we just went around and knocked on doors all over the country, and ended up with really just an amazing random mix of Israeli people that you can, that we would have never otherwise met. For me, sometimes people ask me sort of, what is the best thing for you personally about Israel Story? And it's my answer is always that it's that I get to leave my own personal bubble, because Israeli society is very segregated. Me personally, I'm from Tel Aviv, and I love Tel Aviv, and that's sort of my bubble. But I'm so happy that Israel Story gives me this opportunity to leave my bubble and meet Israel from very, very personal and different perspective. Mishy, if you want to, maybe I'll give one example from Ofakim, because we can't go into all of them, but like one of these guys that really stuck to me is Moshe Shimon Peretz. I have his insert lined up of This is him. It's not an insert really. It's just a moment, a moment. I think you can hear my sound. That's just, by the end of the interview, we were really like, he was hugging us and kissing us. We were like really close friends with this very, very poor Mizrahi Haredi guy from Ofakim, who was living in a house with no electricity. But he opened his house to us and, gave us, food and drink, and just like shared his life with us. He had a fascinating life. So it was just an amazing experience, actually. Project.
I'll just, Pamela, perhaps add to that about Herzl 48, but it really is sort of true of our project in general, which is that early on we decided that Israel Story was going to be an apolitical project. And what that exactly means, and what the limits and boundaries of being political or apolitical are of course never clear, and it's a question that we deal with almost on a daily basis. But and in a very real manner, everything is political, because if you run a piece about an Eritrean refugee living in South Tel Aviv, as Yochai did in one of our early episodes, that's a political statement, because some people in Israel, believe that Eritrean refugees are infiltrators that need to be kicked out, and others believe that they're asylum seekers that need to be, dealt with according to all kinds of international regulations. So you can never really shy away from the political entirely, but we're apolitical in that we tell a variety of different stories. We tell stories of Palestinians, of Israelis, of Jews, of Muslims, of Christians, of settlers, of kibbutznikim, and so on and so forth. And we're also apolitical in that we don't, as a show, have any political stance. We'll never say, well, in the last year, as you all know, there were 3 elections in Israel. We never once asked our listeners to support a candidate or a party or anything like that, and we never would. And in fact, by just listening to Israel Story, you might not even know that there were 3 elections in Israel this year. But for the viewers, we're seeing beautiful pictures from our shows in Seattle over the years. But our one political stance, and this is fundamental to the mission of our show, is that a person is a person is a person. And that we only will gain from listening to each other. And, living in a world in which politicians tend to vilify entire groups and say that Mexicans are rapists or murderers or, whatever, or this group is... That's a stance that we don't adhere to or don't accept. We say that a person is a person is a person, and that everyone has a story to tell, and that we can only learn from that story. So Yochai gave the example of Moshe Shimon Peretz from Ofakim during Herzl 48, and I'll add perhaps one other example from that exact same project, which was that most of the people that we talk to are not people who have ever been interviewed in their lives. They're regular people who live their normal lives. And most people are not interested in their story. Even their kids aren't really interested in their stories. So when we show up at their doorstep, it's a unique experience for them. And while working on Herzl, which was already more than 5.5 years ago, amazing, Yochai, how long has passed. But Yochai and I's other friend and co-founder, Shai Satan, and I went up to Kiryat Shmona, which for those of you who don't know is in the northern border of Israel with Lebanon. And we showed up at Herzl 48, and we knocked on the door, and some very kind woman called Sima Mutai let us in, and we sat with her, and we had the sort of motto of our show is that everyone has a story to tell. And as someone who's done so much oral history, I think you share that fundamental belief, Pamela. And
Yes.
And we were sitting with Sima and asking her questions, and it was really an amazing situation, because for the very first time, we had already been doing this project by then for 3 or 4 years. For the very first time, we encountered someone who literally had no story to tell. She was the most boring woman that I had ever encountered. She was lovely and very nice, but we kept on trying to get a story out of her, and there was nothing. It was about like the history of the renovation of Herzl Street in Kiryat Shmona, and the bench used to be here, and then they moved the bench there, and Shai and I were looking at each other and sort of pulling out our hair, and after 2 hours or something of trying to get a story out of her, we started to question the premise of our project, and that's when she got a phone call, and it was her son on the phone, She took the call in the other room. And when she came back, we said, "Oh, who was that?" And she said, "It was my son." And we were grasping at straws. So we said, what did you talk about? We were very nosy. And she said, "Well, we're planning his birthday. He's going to be, I can't remember, 33 or whatever it was." And I sort of quickly calculated in my mind. And I said, so he was born in June 1982. And she said, "Yeah, it's an interesting thing. He was born. I didn't bring this up because I didn't think it would be of interest to you. But he was born at 5 a.m. on June 7th, 1982 or whatever. And 2 hours later, at 7 a.m., my brother was killed in the First Lebanon War on the very same day." And she named her son after her dead brother, and her mother, meaning the baby's grandmother, could never call the baby by his name because she felt that he was a replacement for her dead son. So that's an example how people don't even realize, the drama that's within their own life and within their own world. And if you sit with someone for long enough, everyone is bound to have an unbelievable story.
Yeah. So I guess it's one thing for you guys to have created this show where you get those stories from people that are the details of everyday life that become fascinating and untold unless you ask. But then you go ahead and you create these multimedia shows where you have layers of things that augment the story. And I did share some of those images, which I can share again, of musicians working with artists like Hanoch Piven and others to create these stories visually. So what led to this massive expansion of those stories into a stage show?
Hi.
Mishy, I'm asking Mishy that one first because
sure. Yeah.
Just to follow up on
it
what
is because of Mishy.
Well, because he talked about taking people's stories and then you're animating them in some other way. And then Yochai, maybe you can add to that.
As many things throughout this unlikely journey of ours in Israel's story, it happened almost by chance. A lot of things, perhaps later on, we'll talk about Israel Palooza, which happened yesterday, which was another thing which we never really planned. And then, we're trying to adjust to these Corona days and came up with something, and who knows what the shelf life of that idea will be. But the live shows came because we were approached by the Manhattan JCC and asked if we would be willing to come and headline their Yom Ha'Atzmaut celebration with a live show. We knew that This American Life and Radio Lab and other shows that we admired had done live shows, but we had no idea what that entailed. And we essentially tried to create a staged adaptation. And we were pretty nervous because here we were coming to perform in New York, and we knew that every single person could hop on the subway and go see a Broadway show instead of coming to see us. And we're not performers. One of the things we liked about radio was its anonymity. And over the years, those shows have really taken off and become more and more elaborate, as you said, with collaborations with musicians. So now we tour with a whole band of live, amazing musicians who perform live, and we've had shows with dancers and comedians and animators and graffiti artists and what else are we forgetting, Yochai?
I think I just want to say, because you asked how did that happen. I think it's just Mishy has this incredible habit of really dreaming very big, and I kind of go along with it, usually reluctantly, or at least somewhat reluctantly, because I'm like, no, Israel Palooza, it seemed like a crazy idea, really, like what we did, or also Israel Story, or either that, or like we don't really know what we're getting into. So we have this idea and we're like, it seems like, we've been doing this music coming out from our computers thing. And it's nice, but it's not like having a cellist, We're like, if we have a cellist, why don't we have also a percussionist and you know, and then it becomes a 5-piece band, and for a 5-piece band you need a sound man, and slowly, you know, things sort of escalate.
My next dream is to tour with the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
But these are partnerships and relationships that you've built, Yochai. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how Israelpalooza came about, because clearly you guys weren't doing enough. So what was Israelpalooza?
So, I mean, I think like everybody in the world, this whole COVID-19 and Corona business affected us greatly. As the show has progressed, so as you know, of course, Pamela, you've been a very big part of this, and the Seattle JCC. These shows have become a really integral part of our how we fund ourselves, because we go kind of like sort of a lot of musicians in Israel on Yom Ha'Atzmaut. We go for these tours all across North America and perform in all kinds of communities, and that really is part of how we sustain the show. And of course, this Yom Ha'Atzmaut, that didn't happen, also for other reasons. But we were sort of trying to think what to do from that aspect, but also just, you know, everybody I think really wanted to do something for Yom Ha'Atzmaut. We wanted to do something, and we were doing these. In the meantime, during the month and a half of quarantine, we've been doing these live Facebook events where we sort of go back. This is more like to our community of fans on our community Facebook page. Maybe this is a good segue to say to anybody out there. So you're welcome to, you know, look us up on Facebook, Instagram, come join our Facebook community, which is sort of a closed community where we have sort of more conversations and extra things, and of course sign up to our feed. So we were doing these events on the Facebook feed where we were interviewing our favorite past characters from stories, and those were going pretty well, and they were well attended, and they were fun to do. And Mishy came up with this idea, actually, I think it was 2 weeks ago, to just hold like a day-long, sort of string a bunch of those together. I don't know if we initially thought it would be so long, but that, yeah, and then we just, you know, we're like, I thought that was a brilliant idea, actually, from the start. And we immediately just got on our computers and started emailing and brainstorming interesting people. And I think the lineup we got was really, I'm not sure I believed we could achieve such an interesting lineup of people. And it's, you know, it's cool. I think we use the sort of the disadvantages that everybody's sort of stuck at home really to our advantage, and got really interesting people to come up and talk to us. And yeah.
Mishy, what was a highlight of Israelpalooza, and why do you think that it was well suited to this moment, other than everyone being available at this time? The lineup is pretty incredible, from like Singapore to the US to Israel. I mean, you were all over the world. People from South Africa were, so you did create sort of this global community, but the artists also represent something for you as well, do they not?
Of course. So I think, you know, when we first started thinking about this, I was actually talking, Yochai, I don't know if I told you this, I was talking to Roy, who's our other friend who started the show with us and is now in a different world of neuroscience. And I said, Roy, you know, I have this dream of doing a 12-hour long marathon of, and he said, 12 hours? Why don't you do 1 hour or 2 hours? That seems like a better idea. And, but I'm actually glad that we ended up doing it in the way that we did, not only because it was kind of like a music festival that people could come in and out, even though to our surprise, we're hearing from many people who actually sat in front of their computers for 12 hours and spent the entire day with us. Okay? I'm sure they're as exhausted as we are, but I think one of the big advantages of having really such an ambitious program was that we were able to, much like this show in its entirety, to touch on many different realms of life, you know. So we had Jews and Arabs, and even among the Arabs that we had, there were actually completely different kind of takes on what being an Arab citizen of Israel is, from Lucy Arish, who is in many ways kind of in the heart of the Israeli mainstream, to Nas Daily, the video blogger who's essentially left Israel and moved to Singapore and is dismayed with Israeli society. So we had Jews and Arabs, and we had people living in Israel, and Israelis like Moshe Safdie who live primarily abroad. People like Yitzhak Perlman, the violinist, who talked about. So there's some nice live annotating of this answer. And I think what we did also, we had all the conversations ended up. We had interactive things. Yochai's good friend is Nir Mesika, is a celebrity chef in Israel, and he taught folks how to make a shakshuka. And Hanoch Piven, who you saw just a minute ago, guided Shannon Street. You see now, as the leader of the Dag Nachash and a hip hop artist, and Amari Stoudemire, an NBA all-star. But I think. And Dan Shechtman, Israel, a professor, Nobel laureate in chemistry, and on and on and on. And I think one of the things that was interesting about that is that it really gave you a wide perspective on Israeli society, and all of the conversations that we had were sort of between half an hour and an hour, and that allowed us to get off, the normal talking points and really hear these people as human beings. I don't know if the listeners and viewers are familiar with the amazing project here in the States called Storycorps. But the premise of Storycorps is that if you have a 40-minute long conversation, you by definition have to exit the small talk realm. And I think, Yochai, say what you think, but I think that in really all of the conversations, we did manage to do that. People sort of reflected on their childhood, on their relationship with Israel, in a way that we're not accustomed to hear. I mean, so many people, Yitzhak Perlman's, ubiquitous. He's everyone's in love with him, but how often do you get him to hear him talk about what it was like to say goodbye to his friends in Tel Aviv when in 1957 he came to America to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, and all kinds of things like that, which are much more personal. Or Yochai, maybe you can give the example of Gil, who's also you managed to sort of make him into a human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was a surreal experience for us. Really, I'm still I don't know what I think about it yet, honestly, because it just ended a second ago, So I'm still processing. It was very intense. It was a long day.
I'm curious to know, Yochai, despite your being as tired as you are, is this a skill that everyone has? Here we are, we're home with people that we love. We're a telephone call away, a Zoom away. Is there something about the people should know about how to get past as Mishy said, the 40-minute small talk? Because we are looking for deeper connection. What do you have to teach us about that?
My answer is yes, we all have it. The 45-minute small talk is not something that you have to overcome, or it's just natural. I mean, we don't open up instinctively. You don't meet somebody and you tell them your deepest secrets, or it makes sense to do some small talk. You're sniffing him out, you're understanding who this person is, how to talk to him, what you should say. And 45 minutes is, sometimes it takes a few days or, a much longer period for people to open up. It all sort of depends on the circumstances and the story. But I think that's a good natural sort of defense mechanism. And we always, when we talk about interviewing, and I think somebody sort of asked a little question there about our process and stuff. So we always say that we go in rolling. So we go in with our tape recorder rolling, and we know that the first sort of half hour, 40 minutes of the tape is it's trash tape, almost always. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally that's what happens. You end up, talking about having a pretty boring conversation for half an hour, 40 minutes. And then if it's a good interview, something sort of happens. There's a rapport that's built, a click, and usually the better tape comes from that point on or towards the end. So, and as in answer to your question about do we all sort of have it, I think that humans, this is what defines, the way I see it, what defines humans is that we're storytelling machines. So we're not just like complicated computers that can sort of ingest and output all this data, but we ingest all this data, we turn it into stories, and that's how we output it as well. So I think it's just part of being a human is interpreting the world into all kinds of stories and telling stories.
So I'm curious, Mishy, we talked about this a little bit, but it's a sort of an existential question, so take it however you will. But, you know, at the end of the day, and I'd love to answer some more questions from folks on Facebook Live and
yeah, please ask.
chat. But, you know, what has Israel Story accomplished since you've started working on it? What are sort of the struggles or the joys? What are the things you've left on the cutting room floor that you felt were things you didn't want to tell or, you know, had to wait for another time? What are some of the things you've learned through this process?
I think that's a question that I struggle with a lot and think about a lot of what we're actually accomplishing. There was a period in time where close to 100% of our audience were Jews. And I feared that what we were essentially doing with Israel Story was we were allowing primarily liberal American Jews an avenue or path to feel connected to Israel on a non-political level. So, you know, everything for them, the political discourse and narrative about Israel was perhaps troubling, and here these folks came with these human interest stories, and it was almost kind of a return to yesteryear where you could, like, you know, essentially once again be proud about being a Jew and having Israel out there, and I don't think that that's unimportant. I do think that that is something that's of relevance, but my gut feeling told me that we should be doing more than that. We should be talking to people who we should be expanding the circles of those engaged with Israel. We should be challenging people, and we should be saying real things, not just sort of these kind of feel-good narratives of, you know, I don't know, love stories of people meeting on a plane or whatever. And we've devoted a lot of efforts and time to that in recent years. And in fact, now, still, of course, the majority of our listeners are Jews, but it's now closer to 3/4 of our listeners, which is significant. And in survey after survey, we learned that actually people have come to reevaluate their opinions about Israel or see Israel in a new light as a result of our content. And I think that that's something that we want to continue to do, to try to tell stories that are really as stories good enough that you could be interested in consuming them, even if you have no interest whatsoever in Israel or in Judaism. We do have listeners all over the world, and that's a source of pride for us. And I think for us, it's never really about, it's lovely to have the reach and recognition and to you know, have a lot of listeners, which thankfully we now do. But I think really for all of us, it was never really about that. It was about being able to tell complicated, interesting stories that we were proud of, and trusting people that they will gravitate towards that kind of journalism.
So Yochai, I'd love to hear your point of view as well, maybe to close this out. But one thing I will say, as somebody who presents Israel Story or has presented Israel Story and who has run the Seattle Jewish Film Festival for 16 years, and also as an academic and by training, it's that people's ability to engage happens so much with the live arts, that live arts are truly the caretakers of the human spirit and the complexity and diversity of cultural difference. And I will say that having tried to have the nuances of Israel come through in Seattle for many, many years in all of its glory and diversity, I think Israel's story is one of the most successful and most nuanced and truly heart-rendering, visceral, touching ways that one can do that. I truly believe in your project.
Thank you so much.
People will talk for 15 minutes about a film, but they will sit through 2 hours of your storytelling that is, it's marvelous, amazing, and truly, I look forward to having you back. So maybe Yochai, you can take it out. I don't know if you have anything else to share with us clip-wise or story-wise, but maybe you can wrap it up for us. I see there was one question, but I think you answered it about mapping up your subjects.
I mean, I think it's every storyteller comes to it from their own perspective. I think Mishy is one of those people that just really thinks in stories. So it's rare to meet Mishy and something very dramatic hasn't happened to him, you know? And it doesn't make sense statistically that so much more dramatic things happen to Mishy than to me, you know? It's we probably have, you know, we live kind of similar lives. So it's just that his mind shapes everything into a drama, you know? I'm not saying you're a drama queen, Mishy, just a little bit, but in a good way. For me, I think I come at stories a little differently. It tends to be sort of a way, kind of a therapy almost. So if there's a sort of a topic or something that I'm not sure what I think about or bothers me, those tend to be stories that I dive deeper into. I look for a story that sort of has to deal with that problem. Whether it's stories that I've done about, I don't know, like assisted suicide or eating meat, or all kinds of you know, things that I'm grappling with. So I'll look for a story that has all kinds of open questions in my mind.
So you're both living right now partially in the U.S.
Right.
What's next for Israel's story? Are you going to make, you know, the Joshua Tree album? You know, what are you looking at Israelis in America? Is that where your eyes are turning? There's a lot of rich Israeli culture happening in the U.S. What's the next for Israel's story? What's next for you both? Mishy first.
Look, the truth of the matter is that Israel's story is as an organization is constantly growing, and it's a real challenge to maintain, especially in these days, to maintain Israel's story. So it's a continuous uphill battle to be able to put out these episodes and seasons, and it's taught us a lot about not only storytelling but management and fundraising and logistics and marketing and all kinds of things like that. You know, we have a lot of, as our operation has sort of exited the cultural startup realm and moved into like an actual functioning and professional organization, we start to plan long in advance. So we're now, you know, we already have plans for not only the upcoming season, but even the season after that. And we're, you know, we always want to challenge ourselves and think of new ways of telling these stories. I mean, Israel Palooza is a good example of that. I don't think that's...
Just wondering, Mishy, is that in the audience, this is a question to the audience, actually. I'm wondering if the people watching this and the attendees here, are you guys Israel Story listeners? Are you hearing about us for the first time? I'm just curious. So just throwing that out there. Sorry, Mishy.
Yeah, no. And say where you're listening from. Are you all from Seattle?
Yeah, I'm guessing they're from Seattle, right? Or no, Pamela?
I think a good part of the folks that are here today are from Seattle. I see some of the folks that have Zoomed in at least, and I know a couple of folks have actually been to some of your live shows. So what are some of the stories that everyone that's here can look forward to, and what are the things you're thinking about? And then I think I just want to thank you both so much for being game, for being with us today, and after a 12-hour, 2-week marathon. I'm so grateful. On Facebook, Anita from Port Orchard says hi. A couple of people from Seattle.
Of course, we're game, Pamela. For you, anything.
But just so that the people who are watching the Zoom recording, they won't see these. There are, my brother-in-law from South Africa and New York City is on Facebook today. Hi, Leon. He's stuck in an apartment in New York City. I won't give him your address, Leon.
We'll come knocking to record your story.
You have first timers who've seen you. I did want to just say that, we've had a real effort to try to get youth to see your shows too. I think it's really important. The Jewish Federation here in Seattle and Hillel have been great partners to make sure that college students and youth are coming to learn more about the nuances of Israel because of what happens on campus, obviously. So with that, I'm going to say thank you both so much. Yochai, was there anything else you wanted to add to the people that said that answered your question?
Well, no, just do you want to wrap up, or how do you want?
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up. Did you have something to play for us?
If you want, I can play a few. If there are people that are interested, I can play a few inserts of the upcoming season.
Hell yeah!
Yeah. All right. So
it's a sneak peek.
A little teaser. Yeah. Actually, Mishy hasn't heard.
Right.
Two out of the three of these inserts that I'll play. So just 3 stories coming to your ears very soon from season 5. Amazing. We've done 50 episodes. It's
amazing.
It's crazy. Each one of those episodes has been blood, sweat, and tears. So we're going to talk about a combination you don't really often think about in a story from our amazing producer, Joel Shupak. By the way, to your question about Israel versus sort of the center moving to stories about Israelis abroad, I think me and Mishy are both sort of here for the time being, but plan on going back to Israel. And we have a whole team that's producing stories in Israel. So it's not just me and Mishy. There's a whole team of really talented producers behind the scenes here, really.
Producers, editors, interns.
In Israel. So most of the operation is in Israel. So anyway, usually you don't really think about, when you think about Israel, you don't really think about baseball, but this is a story that's going to be all about baseball.
Israeli baseball program has come out of nowhere to take the baseball world by storm.
To some, the fact that Israel is in the tournament at all is a small miracle. But if that's something to spin a dreidel about.
And now Israel is one strike away from making history.
Team Israel is on the verge of winning the whole thing. If they can just win this last game, they're going to the Olympics. But this is baseball. Anything can happen.
The pitch. And this ball's flown out to right field. Simon Rosenbaum reaches up.
You'll have to listen to.
Unfortunately, that was supposed to air during the Olympics when Israel was going to be, the baseball team was going to be competing. But now we sort of don't know. Do we sit on this story for a year till Tokyo 2021?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see.
Everybody's up for a Jewish baseball story or an Israeli baseball story. I think it's timeless.
Yeah.
So anything else, Yochai? Did you want to play us another clip?
I mean, up to you. I have 2 more lined up.
Let's take 2 more.
All right. So this one is a Haredi, a very Haredi woman called Tzipora, amazing woman who is actually born in Korea. So she's Korean, and she runs in the old city of Jerusalem. She runs an amazing kosher Korean restaurant and actually exports Korean food to all over the world. She's a powerhouse.
Not too random.
This is Tzipora.
I was very close to my mom. Yeah, she was always in my heart. Even though, I failed my life and, got divorced, I lost everything, including my children and everything, she was always right there to do what she can, rather than like a judging or telling me what to do, not to do. My mother was a great singer. She wanted to be a singer. But back then, when she was growing up, they don't let their daughters to become singer or public entertainer, something like that. It's not respectable.
Did she sing to you?
Oh yeah, she actually sang like until almost as she passed away. Yeah.
Can you give us just like a taste?
금강산 일만이요 봄마다 기암이네.
So I just want to tell our listeners who are less familiar with this. it's quite a special and rare moment when a Haredi woman starts to sing in front of you. It's not really mekubal. It's not accepted so much. It was really a very special moment for me there. And she has a crazy story, and she's a very compelling character, and you can hear that. And then the last little clip I'll play to you. This is maybe some of you remember in early 2000s there was Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip. I have my own personal ties to that because my sister actually lived in Netzarim, which is sort of a settlement right smack in the middle of the Gaza Strip. It's like an enclave, very crazy place to live during a certain period of time. And this is sort of the story of the disengagement through this amazing, actually German woman, another Gioret, who worked with horses. And this sort of story is going to tell her story of sort of how she came to Judaism and found herself in Netzarim, but it's also going to concentrate on this amazing, she's a horse therapist. She does like horse therapy, and actually the story, it's going to be the story of the disengagement from Gaza from the perspective of this amazing horse therapy horse, a white horse called Sheleg, who she loved very, very much, and how he experienced the disengagement. It's a little bit of a tragedy. I won't give it away. This is Hodaya describing and talking about Sheleg, the horse.
I worked with a lot of horses in my life, like really with a lot of horses. This is a really special one. She was really understanding Hebrew. You could talk to her, you know, yeah. And she was very communicative, you know, like it was something very special. I had a really short story which was very characteristic for her. One day we were on this grass place, and I had a really small child, like even not 3 years old, sit on her, and suddenly we hear it went into a building like really not far away from us, yeah. And I had this little child on her, and it was this explosion. Usually if there was a rocket really close, she was jumping, you know, like I saw her freezing, like saying, just take off this child, you know. I took off the child and he made a big jump, you know, like she really like got herself together not to jump right away because she knew there is a little child on her back and she would throw him off, you know.
So yeah, all kinds of stories, that and many more stories that we're working on, and yeah, alongside all these Israel Paloozas and other things, but we're also working on new content for you.
Amazing. Well, if that was a sampling of the nuances of Israel, you just gave it to us right then and there. I think it is a gift of how you see not just the nuances in who people are, but also the stories that they have to tell. And clearly there is something about their willingness to tell these very personal and deep stories. Amazing. Mazel tov on your Israel Palooza. It's so great to know you both, your creative souls, and we so can't wait to see you back in Seattle and up and running.
Seattle. Well, thank you, Pamela. Thank you so much. You're such a big part of this, and Seattle really does feel like home. So we can't wait to be back.
Well, thank you, Zoomies. Thank you, Facebook Livers, for joining us today. And thank you, Mishy Harman and Yochai Maital, for being up for today's Israel Independence Day post discussion of Israel Palooza and Israel Story. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.